In the late 1950s, a quiet, unassuming scientist named John B. Calhoun packed up his rats and walked away from the open Maryland countryside and into a locked government laboratory.
HQ, this is Post 3. We have an emergency in Calhoun's secure block. There's some kind of strange whispering coming from the vents. Do not open the blast door, for God's sake, do not open it.
What happened behind those doors would go on to haunt urban planners, psychologists, and sociologists for decades. Let's rewind for a second. Calhoun wasn't new to this. Back in the 1940s, he'd already spent years watching wild Norway rats breed in a fenced barnyard enclosure, just observing what happened when you gave a rodent population food, water, shelter, and time. But the outdoors was messy. Weather interfered, predators interfered, variables he couldn't control kept slipping into his data. So when the National Institute of Mental Health offered him space and funding, Calhoun said yes. This was his chance to build something precise, something controlled, a laboratory built specifically to answer one unsettling question. What happens to a society when it runs out of room, but never runs out of food? Picture the setup. Calhoun designed special pens, enclosed rooms subdivided into interconnected sections, each one accessible by ramps and stairways. Food hoppers and water bottles were placed generously throughout. In theory, no rat would ever go hungry. No rat would ever go thirsty. The only thing Calhoun was rationing was space. He started small, a handful of rats, given everything they needed to survive and breed without limit. And breed they did. The population climbed, slowly at first, then faster. Calhoun watched, took notes, and waited. At first, things looked almost orderly. Dominant males claimed territory. They defended their sections, gathered small harems of females, and life inside the pens resembled something like a normal rat society, just denser. But density has a breaking point, and Calhoun was about to find it. As the numbers kept climbing, some sections of the enclosure became wildly overcrowded, while others stayed relatively empty. Rats didn't spread out evenly. Psychologically, some couldn't handle even the possibility of contested territory, and they crammed together instead, dozens of animals packed into spaces meant for a fraction of that number. Calhoun gave this phenomenon a name that would later become famous in psychology and sociology circles: the behavioral sink. It described a location where dysfunction pooled and concentrated, like waste collecting at the bottom of a drain. And inside that sink, things fell apart. Dominant males, stretched too thin, trying to defend impossible amounts of territory, gave up. Some withdrew entirely, becoming passive, almost catatonic, ignoring challenges and mating attempts alike. Other males swung the opposite direction, becoming hyper-aggressive, attacking indiscriminately, sometimes even cannibalizing other rats, including infants. Female rats, overwhelmed by the chaos and unable to complete normal nesting behaviors, began abandoning their litters. Nests were built haphazardly or not finished at all. Infant mortality inside the most crowded pens skyrocketed. In some sections, nearly every young rat died before reaching maturity. Mating behavior itself became distorted. Normal courtship rituals broke down under the stress of constant social intrusion. There was no privacy, no ability to complete behaviors that, under normal density, would unfold in a predictable sequence. Calhoun observed patterns of behavior that deviated sharply from anything seen in the wild. By 1962, Calhoun had enough data to publish his findings. And he didn't publish them in some obscure academic journal buried in a university archive. He published them in Scientific American in an article titled Population Density and Social Pathology. And that title alone tells you exactly where his mind had gone. Because Calhoun wasn't just interested in rats anymore. He was interested in us. His NIMH experiments landed at a moment when American cities were exploding in population, when high-rise housing projects were reshaping urban skylines, and when psychologists were beginning to seriously ask whether crowding itself might be a kind of psychological toxin. Calhoun's work became a reference point in that conversation, cited by architects, city planners, and public health officials trying to understand what dense living conditions might do to the human mind. Was it a perfect parallel? Not exactly. Rats aren't people. And critics at the time and since have pointed out the limits of applying rodent behavior directly to human societies. But Calhoun himself was cautious about that leap too, even as his data kept circulating far beyond the walls of his laboratory. What's certain is this: between 1958 and 1962, inside a government research facility most people never saw, one scientist built miniature worlds and watched them fall apart from the inside, not from famine, not from disease, not from predators, just from too many bodies in too little space with nowhere left to go. And Calhoun wasn't finished. This was only the beginning. A few years later, he would build something even more ambitious, an enclosure he'd call Universe 25. But that's a story for another video.
Log entry 84, Sector C. They still have an unlimited supply of food and water, but they no longer eat together. We have to clear away mutilated bodies every single day. The attackers are not fighting for resources. They mutilate each other, just because they can. Their abundance has birthed pure evil.